when the world is beautiful, can no one be well? But a dreamt we were both beautiful, and no one be well. When the world is beautiful, can no one be well? But I dreamt we were all beautiful and strong.
We want to welcome you if you're feeling weary or feeling energized. We welcome you if you've been on this walk from the beginning, or if you have just recently joined in, or if you're just here for the night. We welcome you if environmental justice is brand new to you or has been on your heart for years. We welcome you if your feet are smooth and clean, or if your feet are calloused and bruised. We welcome you if your body is dirty. Oh no, if your body is a place where you feel it at home in, or if your best days are kind of uneasy and uneasy with your body. We welcome you if you are a morning person or a night person. We welcome you if you are a Democrat or Republican or neither. We welcome you if you are gay or straight, or if either of those labels describe who you are. We welcome you if you are a person of faith or if you're not. We welcome you if your skin is the color of pine or cedar or walnut or ebony. We welcome you if your disabilities are where others can see them, or if your disabilities are harder to see. We welcome you if you are older, and we thank you for your wisdom and your energy. We welcome you if you are younger, and we thank you for your wisdom and your energy. We welcome you if you are a woman or a man, or if neither of those words fit you. We welcome you if you are wounded and healing, trying to recover your strength. And we welcome you if you are feeling strong and trying to figure out where to use your resources. We welcome you if you are transitioning out of something and mourning what is lost. And we welcome you if you are moving towards something exciting and trying to discern its shape, or if you're unsure of exactly where you are. We welcome you if you feel like any of these words describe you, or none describe you at all. Each of you is welcome here. All of you are welcome here, and most importantly, all of you are welcome.
So one of the themes of this event for us has been repentance. And this is a song of repentance, particularly for the ways that we, as an entire global community, have neglected God's creation. And it's easy to sing, and it's very repetitive. And so I'll teach you all the parts, and we'll sing it over and over and over. It's somewhat like songs from the Taizé tradition, where the idea is that you move beyond just the words that you are saying and into another place of prayer. And Madison and I will also sing some verses over top once we get going. So. There are three parts. The first part goes like this. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Try that. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Great. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Second part. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Third part. Lord have mercy, 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 Lord have mercy,
If each watershed had its own fingerprint, it also has its own smell and taste. When rearing fish that are to return to their birthing place, they are kept in flowing waters that from that place, they imprint on the sensory information contained there. In the Pacific Northwest, they can follow the trace information and find their way back from 1,000 miles away. It is impossible to see that fingerprint from a map. But today you will walk across two small watersheds that feed the Little Wabash. First, you will come to Brush Creek, Nicholson's Creek, Skillet Creek twice, and then Dumbs Creek twice. Can you see anything that delineates one from the other? If each one of these are as unique as they are, then shouldn't we be thinking of them as sacred gifts from our Creator?
The history of the United States and the history of American Christianity includes the painful history of colonialism. We are settlers on land that does not belong to us. We acknowledge that we are gathered today on the hunting grounds and homelands of Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Miami, the Osage, and the Illinois. These people have used this land since time immemorial and continue to do so in the present. We offer them our gratitude and respect and hope in solidarity with them to strive for justice for our planet and for all people.
A reading from the Gospel according to Mark. Later that day, when evening came, Jesus said to them, "Let's cross over to the other side of the lake." They left the crowd and took him in the boat just as he was. Other boats followed along. Gale force winds arose and waves crashed against the boat so that the boat was swamped. But Jesus was in the rear of the boat, sleeping on a pillow. They woke him up and said, "Teacher, don't you care that we're drowning?" He got up and gave orders to the wind, and he said to the lake, "Silence, be still." The wind settled down, and there was a great calm. Jesus asked them, "Why are you frightened? Don't you have faith yet?" Overcome with awe, they said to each other, "Who then is this? Even the wind and the sea obey him."
Tonight we are going to hear stories from two hurricanes, from Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Sandy. Iliana and Justina Anise are going to talk about their experiences during and surviving Hurricane Sandy, and Irene and Ed are going to talk about surviving and then the recovery efforts around Hurricane Katrina. We thank you for your stories, for all of the vulnerability that it will cause you to share with us, and we promise to hold your stories gently. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Are we unmuted?
Yeah.
Yes, right? Okay. So as Abby said, I'm Justina, and I'm here with my twin sister, Iliana, who is not unmuted. Hold on. Oh, there we go.
Oh, okay.
And I am tuning in from New Jersey. She is tuning in from Madison, Wisconsin. So we wanted to thank you for having us, and we are very thankful for taking part in this awesome and important cause. So we're just going to give you like a tiny bit of backstory on kind of our town, and then we're going to talk about Sandy, preparing for the hurricane and living through the hurricane, and then a little bit of like aftermath stuff as well.
Okay, so during Hurricane Sandy, we lived in Seabright, New Jersey, which is a really small beach town on a peninsula, and it's around 1.2 square miles. Justina, if you have that map, can you share your screen?
Yeah.
So is it okay?
I think so.
Oh, I can't see it. So the town is a really small beach town, and when at its widest point, it's probably like 1.2 miles wide, and it's situated between the Atlantic Ocean and the Shrewsbury River. I don't know if you can see that map. I don't.
Yeah, it's pretty small. I don't know.
We're not seeing
I
it.
don't know.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not working.
We're seeing Justina's Zoom.
That's what I see too.
Sorry, I don't know. It says it's
Okay.
sharing.
You are sharing your screen, but you've got the Zoom up.
Oh.
It's okay if you can't see
All right,
it.
it's okay. Sorry.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a really small beach town, and in 2010, the population was like, I don't know, 1,000. How many people, Justina? Do you know? 1,000 something people. I can't see my notes. So. Yeah.
1,400.
1,400. So it's a pretty small town, situated between two bodies of water, and I guess we'll tell you a little bit about Hurricane Sandy, just so that if you're not unfamiliar with it, we can give you some perspective on that. If you want to talk to that a little, Justina.
Yeah, I think before we go on, it's important to note that people all along New Jersey, New York, and the East Coast were affected by the storm. And obviously, we're only telling our story.
As well as people in the Caribbean and Canada.
Yeah. But there are a lot of others out there. So Sandy was a hurricane and then categorized as a superstorm. It killed at least 117 people in the US and 69 more in Canada and the Caribbean. And it's the second costliest storm behind Hurricane Katrina. And the reason why it was so bad was because the storm shifted from warm water to, and basically like encountered a winter cyclone, which increased the storm size. And it hit us as a category 2. But the wind force, the winds extended 175 miles out from the eye. So it was a much larger storm than usual or than typically seen.
So in preparing for the hurricane, we were trying to figure out, and I think we started preparing maybe like 3 days before it was supposed to make landfall. And by then, New Jersey had declared a state of emergency. And to be honest, we didn't do all that much in preparing for the storm, largely because our town had been hit by Hurricane Irene a year prior, and we were fairly lucky in that storm. We didn't sustain many damages, although some other people in our town did. And so mostly in preparing for the hurricane, we moved valuables to like the second floor and put items on tables and on countertops, and kind of thought that would be enough preparation. We tied up our yard furniture outside and just kind of like did the best we could 3 days out. And like once we realized that we were actually going to be hit by this storm, and on the day of mandatory evacuation, like kind of before the hurricane was supposed to make landfall, the town blasted this really loud alarm, pretty intermittently at first, and then as the afternoon wore on, it became kind of this ever-present, consistent blaring noise. And this was like a very stressful and hectic time, and we have quite a few animals, so we had to pack up all of our cats and dogs and pack up as many belongings as we could and leave. So Seabright, as I said, is situated between two bodies of water, and so in order to get to Seabright, you have to cross a bridge. And so
there are bridges on either side of the town.
Mm-hmm. And so then we left, and we were privileged enough to be able to stay in a hotel. So we were able to evacuate. And so basically after the mandatory evacuation was in place and they expected people to leave, Seabright then closed off access. So basically sealed the town off. So if people didn't leave, they were essentially stuck inside.
So even if they had decided to leave afterwards, they couldn't leave.
Yeah. but we left. So then I guess living through the hurricane, Justina.
So the hurricane hit on October 29th, and obviously from the hotel, we experienced a lot of crazy winds and flooding. But it didn't really become real until we were allowed to go back into Seabright, maybe 3 to 5 days after the storm. And we pulled up, and it was my mom, my sister, and I. And there were Red Cross like stations and vehicles set up before the entrance to the bridge. And we encountered a lot of volunteers and other members of our community that were obviously impacted. And there was such an outpouring of support and love there, which we were really grateful for. And I think that's when it started really hitting us that we were experiencing something very traumatic.
Yeah, I would say that it was pretty surreal for us until we got back into the town to see things. And so Seabright, during that time, we're allowing people, like 2 people from each family, to ride in on like military style dump trucks is what I would call them, and kind of just grab as many essentials as you could in like 15 minutes from your home. That's like medication and whatnot. And I quickly surveyed homes and gave each home a score like from 1 to 5 in terms of structural damage to see if people could even be allowed back into their homes. And I think ours received like a 3. So we were allowed back into our home. And so my mom and I got in this dump truck and sat in the back with many other victims from the storm, and kind of just rode over the bridge. And it was really striking to see, because it was like a disaster zone. And it was just this super eerie feeling, and tons of sand and debris everywhere, and like homes completely destroyed. And
yeah, it was unrecognizable.
Unrecognizable, yeah. And so we arrived at our house, and like doors were blown off and windows were shattered. And, you know, then my mom and I went in, and there was sand all over the floor, and all of the furniture was pushed to like the back of the house because the water had rushed in from the ocean side. And, you know, I mean, my mom was basically in shock at this point, so I grabbed all of the essentials that we needed. And yeah, basically the Shrewsbury River and the ocean met in our house, and the watermarks, thankfully the water had receded by then, but was around like 5 feet high. So we had a lot of water damage in our home. So that was kind of maybe the first point that we realized that we were going to have to be doing a lot of healing from this storm. It was pretty traumatic, I think, to see. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So after the storm, there was obviously a lot of rebuilding. The town was occupied by the National Guard, and they had multiple supply tents set up in the main part of the town. So there were like food tents and yeah, like toiletries, that type of thing, and stuff for cleaning, and gloves for sanitation and that sort of thing. And right next to where they had the supply tents, there was like this mountain of debris and garbage from everything that people were having to get rid of. And in addition to that, there was garbage in the river.
Yeah, like tons, a lot of
yeah, like, yeah, it was an obscene amount of garbage in the river, which was also very disturbing to see, as if it wasn't disturbing enough to see our town in shambles and the community in ruins. But obviously, we were really thankful because all of our family came out, and our friends and members of the community were physically supportive and helped us take everything out of our house. And you know, it was days and weeks of work. So we were really grateful for that, and the community was obviously very supportive and helped us all stay strong. We kind of just helped one another.
Yeah, we were really grateful for the community strength. I think without that, it would have been much more difficult than it already was. Everybody really joined together and helped each other in this time of need. And so I guess in terms of, and so that was really important for us, was the sense of community. And we didn't rebuild. We ended up moving to a 1-bedroom apartment, which Justina and my mom are still living in. And so, I guess in a way we're still, you can go.
We're still trying to recover financially from it. The house still is in disrepair, obviously, and the town is still trying to recover. But I think it's going to be a long process, and, you know, considering the impacts of climate change, it's frightening to see people having to rebuild only to have it be destroyed again.
Likely.
Well, yeah.
So I guess that's mostly our story. If anybody has any questions or anything, I guess we'll take them now.
Or I think there's a question session, like a couple minutes for questions after.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Is there anything we missed, Abby?
You told the story that I was hoping that you would tell about having militarized dump trucks.
Okay. Yeah, that was pretty scary.
It was so scary. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And Ed and Irene, you're up.
We're up. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Irene MacIntosh, and the guy sitting next to me is Ed Cake. Otherwise, in our town, we're known as Mr. Ed and Miss Irene. And as we prepared for Katrina, we did all the things that everybody does. We bought everything you could think of that didn't perish. We stood in lines that were miles long to get anything and everything. Because as Katrina came across the Gulf, it got bigger and bigger and bigger because it hit 3 hot spots and it just grew. Those are the engines out there in the Gulf that are caused by some of the issues that we're talking about climate change. And there's the dead spots where those areas of the Gulf are hot. And as Katrina went across those, it just got bigger and bigger and stronger and stronger. So we were getting ready, and you do everything you can do, and then you can't do anything else. You just, you got your windows are boarded up, everything put away, you hope, and you put your cars. We had cars in the driveway because we had a lot of people who come to our house because we're on higher ground, and so everybody was parked, and we were sitting having dinner when there was a knock at the door, and I'll let Ed tell you about the knock.
And the law enforcement officers, sheriff's deputies came in and said to us, "Are you going to evacuate?" And we said, "No, we're at about 41-foot elevation, and if it floods here, we might as well be gone with everybody else." But actually the water level got to about 28 feet in this town. Otherwise, he said, "Well, we need you to sign some papers that we have come and and you're not going to evacuate. But the thing that really got our attention was he gave us a magic marker and he said, I want you to write on your leg your social security number so that when we recover your body, we'll know who you are. That was a very sobering fact that not many people got to witness that night.
Needless to say, there wasn't much conversation after the deputies left. We all just kind of said there wasn't anything left to say.
Tell them why we couldn't evacuate.
And we can't evacuate. My husband has MS, and we can't guarantee that any place within a 500 to 700 miles that we could guarantee that we could have electricity, because the storm always goes somewhere beyond us. And Larry has to have electricity. He has to be cool. And we have a whole house generator that kicks in when the electricity goes off. And we looked for a high point to build our house. So we don't evacuate and other people evacuate to our house. So we went to bed, and I hadn't been in bed very long when I heard a racket. And I jumped out of bed and I ran around and, like an idiot, went out on the carport and met the winds of Katrina and figured out what awakened me was that the tree outside our bedroom window had just gone over. And that was the beginning of a very long night of just hearing howling winds and experiencing tornadoes outside. We were in the eye wall of the storm for a little over 12 hours. And in that eye wall, there were 225 tornadoes. We saw many of those. I'm going to tell you a little bit, and then I'm going to let Ed talk a little bit about being up on the roof. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, a tornado came through, and the huge oak tree in our front yard broke in half. And for about 30 minutes, the sound that I will remember for all my life, that is Katrina to me, was listening to the tree weep and cry as the sinews broke and it lost its life. There's no sound like that. That's God's creation. It's God's nature. And to hear that tree weep as it was dying, and to not have any way to help it, to not be able to do anything. This tree that had provided shade and a beautiful place to gather in our yard was leaving. And while we focus on people and all the damage, there's the damage to God's creation too. And for me, for all my life, that moment and those moments of listening to that tree die will linger forever.
After the storm blew itself out and we began to think about picking up pieces, all were good here. But during the storm, as Irene said, we heard things on the roof, and I went out with an extension ladder and climbed up onto the roof.
I was holding the ladder
with a chainsaw, and we cut some large limbs off because we knew if they stayed up there, they would damage the roof and would knock out the power lines that come to the house. It would take 6 weeks to be restored if we didn't protect them. So we were actively protecting properties during the storm, and then after that, we began to do lots more. The problem is that across the street from Irene's house lives the city's mayor, and when after the storm, he went to his store, which is about a half mile away, and his store was under 12 feet of water. And so I'll let Irene describe what happened when he came back to her.
When Rusty came back, now he's Cajun, so his complexion is dark, and he was stark white from the shock of what he had seen. And he said, I don't think there's anything left in Old Town. We're going to need help. Will you help? You know, God calls us in lots of different ways. He doesn't always call us in a church. He doesn't always call us in prayer. Sometimes he calls us in the middle of the street with trees and everything else around you, and the mayor standing there in his shorts and soaking wet t-shirt, and he said, "We're going to need help. Will you help?" And like anybody would, we said yes. What we didn't know was that he would make us in charge of all the recovery, and that beginning the next day was regular cleanup after Katrina, after a storm. You get everything out of your yard, only this time it wasn't possible. Then Ed he's a chainsaw maniac, if you don't know him. And so in his car that he brought to our house were 6 different size chainsaws. And so the kids on our street and Rusty and his kids and I followed Ed down the street as he whacked trees, and we dragged him out of the street so Rusty could go and see the official status of the rest of the city. So that's what you do at my house. Ed's here with a chainsaw. Then we set up over about a 10-day period. I got in touch with a guy in Jackson, Mississippi. Don't know how my phone worked. Just am grateful God was there. And he told me how we could get our message out. And I started doing that. And then he said, "What do you need?" I said, "I need some people to come. We got high school students who don't have anything to do and they're getting into trouble, and I don't need that. So I need somebody to help me get them in teams and let them do assessment, because we have to assess every property." And so within 3 weeks, every property within our town had been assessed. We had 475 slabs. I don't know if you know what being slabbed means, but it means your house is gone. There's nothing. Ours is a little town. It's a town of moderate to low income. We're not rich, and we don't have a lot. We have a lot of fishermen, a lot of shrimpers, a lot of people who make their living from the sea. And there was nothing. We had no water. We became a third world country in 12 hours. And we would stay a third world country for months. Many parts of our city could not get water, could not get electricity or anything else because of the damage until the city did the infrastructure and rebuilt the house. So getting the assessment allowed us to send home health nurses who came from Florida and stayed at my house for several weeks. We still had electricity, praise you, Jesus. The natural gas didn't go out, and our whole house generator powered our house and the 3 houses on the other side, and we gave our mayor our gas generator so he could have power. And we were able to each morning put coolers together of medicine, especially insulin and cardiovascular meds, and water. And the home health nurses took them out and to as many people as they could get to and administered those critical pieces of medication. Our people put up trees. They decorated them with tarps and rope. And for about 6 weeks, most of our people lived under tarps. That was all we had. It's very difficult to keep older people who have impaired health healthy in those kinds of situations. We began to tarp houses to prevent future damage, to get trees off of them, and we were doing so good, and we had a point of distribution to give away all kinds of stuff to people. And 3 weeks later came Rita. Rita was a very rude visitor. We didn't need a second hurricane 3 weeks after. So if you ask me my lowest point, it was the day after Rita came. Rita took off every tarp we put up, knocked over more trees, tore up and flooded our point of distribution. And it was like, at that point, are we ever going to make any real lasting progress. And you know, when you get that low, God always has some funny person that he brings along that gives you sort of a new perspective. And the funny person on that day were the volunteers from Spanish Fort Methodist Church in Spanish Fort, Alabama, who have been helping us all along, showed up in about 20 pickup trucks with every kind of cleaning material you could ever imagine on the market that they had garnered from everywhere. And they promptly got out of the trucks and started very quietly helping us to create order out of chaos. And then, unfortunately, Rusty decided to make a major change. He's our mayor, remember? And he decided I was going to be incident commander. That means I'm in charge of everything.
Police, fire, everything.
You don't make Irene in charge of everything. Because I kind of like things to be done in order. And I kind of like us to make progress. And I don't like lazy people. So we had, you know, we had a few things that we had to get straight. And at about this time, we made contact with a person from Presbyterian Disaster Assistance. And they became our partners. We will forever be grateful for all of the Presbyterians who came to our town. 91% of our volunteers were Presbyterian. They know how to make a commitment and keep it. And what they said was, what the individual volunteers said was, we're here with you to the end, until everybody's home. And they were 5 years later. That doesn't happen without generosity and sweet, precious people being willing to look at two professors and say, well, maybe they know what to do. We use the scientific process. Anybody know about the scientific process? You assess, you develop a plan, you implement the plan, you reassess the plan, and you change the plan. That's what we did. We're professors. What else do you do when you're a professor? So as the years and weeks went on, actually the first major counterpoint, I guess, was Thanksgiving. How do you celebrate Thanksgiving when nobody has a place to live?
Or to cook a turkey.
Or to cook a turkey, or to serve anything. Well, I have a friend called Mike Wolf, and he was executive director of Capadella Pie at that time. And he kept calling me saying, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? Irene, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? Mike, I can't even get down the street. I don't know what I'm doing for Thanksgiving. He said, well, call me when you do. So about 3 weeks after the storm, I called him and said, okay, Mike, we're going to feed everyone. Good, because we've got money set aside. We got volunteers. We'll bring you all the paper products, everything. And as it came to be, there were some turkeys that were supposed to come from Pennsylvania, and they got hijacked. So the day before Thanksgiving, we have no turkey. And we have no way to get them because we're not rich and we have no money. And so what are you going to do? Well, the people from Avon, Indiana said, hey, Irene, we're bringing 600 pies and 40 volunteers and a bunch of stuff to cook with. Okay, that's good. And then another group said, the Boy Scouts from Warner Robins, Georgia said, we're bringing all the gravy and all of that stuff, and we're bringing the fryers. We're bringing the oil to cook the fryers. Okay.
Fried turkeys.
We weren't going to bake anything. We didn't have any place to bake it, so we were going to fry turkey. But remember, we have 100 turkeys that are missing.
That's from Hope Presbyterian
And those
Church. They're the ones who got
they got
cookers.
the cookers. So then, to make a long story short, on the day we were about to just give this up, I go to the mailbox, and God had provided through the Amish volunteers in Indiana $2,500 in gift cards to Walmart that we then took to buy the turkeys to feed everybody. Then we start to fry turkey. It takes a long time to fry 138 turkeys. You don't know. But we were undeterred. We had 20 fryers hooked up to propane, and we were stirring the air, working as hard as we could work. I mean, going, and inside the concession stand, which is what we use for a kitchen, you know, those places that you have at ball fields, we have all of these women and men with electric knives. Think of the chainsaws again. These are maniacs with these knives.
Electric knives.
And as soon as the turkey came out of the fryer, they rushed it inside, and these people started whacking them up and putting them in Ziploc bags and putting them in coolers, because we're going to serve dinner the next day. We get down to where we have just a few more turkeys to fry. And 2 fryers go out. We have no propane. So the guy in charge is walking up and down the line, and he's shaking. His name was John Golightly from Hope Presbyterian Church in Memphis. And he's shaking, and he's realizing we don't have much more propane. So he stands and he walks up and down the line and he goes, "This is Miss Irene talking to you, God. These are Miss Irene Preston. We need it now. Propane now, Lord. We thank you for the fact that you're going to provide a miracle. Thank you for the propane to fry these turkeys." And they dropped the next 18 turkeys. And they fried, and he's praying all the time. He's going up and down the aisle. "Thank you, Jesus, for the propane. Thank you, Jesus, for the propane." And they shake them, and it's even less in there now, and we still have 18 more turkeys to fry. So they drop the 18, and John Golightly is just literally stomping up and down between these fryers. "Lord Jesus, thank you for the propane. Thank you for the propane." And the story ends with, we fried all the turkeys, and there was enough propane left in the tank for us to cook for 6 weeks. Thank you, Lord, for teaching that when we need you, you are there. Some people would call that coincidence. I will tell you that we call it miracle. And we witness them every single day. On the following day, on Thanksgiving Day, we fed 2,500 people. And then we took up what was left, and we fed 1 day a week. We fed volunteers and citizens for 6 weeks. We learned to be grateful. We learned to be trusting. We learned that it doesn't happen overnight. And we learned that we have to be better caretakers of our environment. And we have to stop this stupidity that's called greed, that results in the kinds of things that multinational companies propose, that because they have no link to any one country, they have no loyalty to anybody except shareholders and themselves. And because of that, we've lost shoreline. We've heated an ocean that creates storms. And it is the people along the shoreline that pay that price. Now, people would say, well, you just go ahead and move. Where are you going to move? You're going to move out west where you get the forest fires? Or are you going to move north where you get the ice storms and the blizzards? Are you going to move to the Midwest where you get the tornadoes? There's not a place in this country where there's not a disaster waiting to happen. And those disasters are driven by climate change that unfortunately is linked directly to those companies who have no soul and worship greed. Now, you didn't hire me to say anything, so I can't get fired for saying that. But I can tell you that it's the truth. Because just as we were getting through with Katrina, we were celebrating the fact that we were almost done. People were home. You could drive down the streets and the lights were on. We built 42 brand new homes, and we have over 1,000, all with volunteer help. 7,500
volunteers who came an average of 3 times. And we amassed 385,000 hours of volunteer effort that was worth almost $7 million in FEMA credits this town did not have to pay back.
Yeah, you may not know that, but if FEMA comes to help you, you've got to pay back the money. A percentage.
And this town is now leading the coast economically over everybody else.
Part of that message, though, is that just as we were getting to the end, we thought the BP oil spill hit. And that's right off our coast.
75 miles south.
75 miles south of us. And we were back to a disaster again, only this is a technological disaster. That's called a man-made disaster. The other one is too, but they don't classify it. So people who, remember, most of our people are fishermen, shrimpers. Now what do they have? They're just getting back to where they could work, and now we can't. And not only that, but with a technological disaster, we can't even go do it because the government says, no, we'll hire somebody. And so what we could do is we could listen. We form listening teams to deal with the depression and the overwhelming trauma that we were going through again. And then right after that, I don't know if you remember, the depression hit, the recession of 2008. So we got so many whammies that you would think we couldn't possibly recover. But you know what? I live among titans. I live among people who are joyful and care more about other people than they do about each other, about themselves, and who would give their last dime to somebody else. As we responded to Katrina, the very first people who contributed anything were the people from the part of our town that had been flooded. They came bringing the cans and the bottles of stuff that were still useful because somebody else didn't. They picked them up out of the water and brought them. This is a town of frugality and a town of people who pinch pennies and never give up. And so for Ed and me, what we really were privileged to experience was the miracle of how God, in his infinite mercy and his truly loving care, came to us. And we looked at Isaiah, and we know the verse that says, they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall run and not grow weary. They shall soar as with wings of eagles. And for us, since Katrina, that's what he's done for us. He's allowed us to be what we need to be to our neighbors. There will be more storms. We were privileged to send help to Sandy, the survivors of Sandy, through our barbecue network, the disaster network, and also in Mount Pisgah in New Jersey. We actually sent, our volunteers went there, and we sent $2,800 worth of supplies there to begin their ability to respond. So we believe in paying it forward. We believe in being responsible. I hope our story gives you hope, because we are fighting with everything we have to restore the environment that's been destroyed by BP. And we are fighting to restore an environment that has been degraded because of the wholesale getting rid of hardwood forests and resulting in our wetlands melting away. Ed and I have been environmental activists all of our life. You might have figured that out. We intend to stay that way. We encourage you to continue with your walk, being nourished with the thought that God will never leave you. He will walk every step with you, and he will give you victory. It's a guaranteed process. I know that's not exactly what we thought we would say, but we hope that it was that we've told the story. Angela, did we tell the story? Good deal. We post, there are some PowerPoints that are posted that tell you the plan of how we did it, and some really horrible pictures of what it was like, and then the recovery, the legacy of our volunteers. Angela was a volunteer with us. Her whole family came many times to help us. So we are so grateful that we're here today, and we know that we're in the crosshairs again. It's a new hurricane season. We so understand. So Justine and Iliana, we know the fear that comes on June 1st of every year as we enter that season again. But we also know there's a way to recover and to move forward. We just need to stop some of the silliness. Thank you so much for inviting us and allowing us to tell you. Do you have questions for any of the four of us? Discussion?
Somebody jump in and explain online what we're thinking, because they can't, this long pauses. You're thinking of taking questions, they're not, other people don't know what
Is
we're
there
saying. Well, so I'm just saying, somebody that gives some direction to others.
Because we can't hear anything. So.
Yeah, we can't hear.
Yeah.
We're going to do some questions and answers for just a few minutes right now. And I think Aida has one. She's ready to go.
Hello.
Mike's on the camera.
Mike's on the camera?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Go, number one, thank you so much for sharing your stories. I'm so sorry these storms happened to you guys, and I'm just glad to be with you guys today so you could share the stories of recovery. That is a blessing. My question is, after these storms, the media seems to have some sort of frenzy around them and tells almost only certain parts of the story. We don't, we're not fed or shown the heroic efforts necessarily that make recovery possible. One thing we did see a lot of after Sandy especially was Jersey Strong as a motto. Jersey Strong, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess my question so Jersey Strong became this cultural phenomenon, and that's kind of when I started understanding that now the media kind of pits us against the environment, like it's a battle or something, and we're going to recover and rebuild in the exact same spot, the exact same way, because we're strong and macho. Do you understand what I'm saying, though?
Yeah,
You kind of fed everyone. And so, I mean, I don't know what multinational corporations have to do with like CNN, Fox, whoever, but I'm asking, like, what do you guys feel about that perspective? Like, how do you feel as victims for some reason by the mass media being pitted against the environment rather than getting to share your stories of lessons learned from these disasters? Thank you.
We discovered, this is just from the Katrina side, we discovered if you lived in a small town, you didn't exist. Katrina is all about New Orleans, as far as the media is concerned, and it didn't happen anywhere else. We were the landmass between New Orleans and Mobile. So we were told, we don't know. We don't know if you're getting help or not. And we were pitted against the environment, and we had to argue our case that we could build strong enough for our people to come back, because they were going to take the land and leave people with nothing. But we were able to work with engineers to develop a safe way to build, and to build those homes with all volunteer work. And it's frustrating when you know that there are answers and the media doesn't go to any place and show any of those. That's our frustration.
Irene, can you tell us where you are?
We're in D'Iberville, Mississippi,
Just north of Biloxi.
just across the bay from Biloxi. So all the stuff that got washed from Biloxi washed into our town, and literally the waves were as high as 47 feet as they broke into our town. And it came in all the way to about a block from my house. There was water. And the thing that's frustrating is that there are ways to build safely, and there are ways to be good stewards. But the places that happens typically don't get covered by the national news.
Justina and Iliana, do you want to respond to Aida's question?
Yes. So our town is rebuilding. There are more strict building mandates now where people have to raise their houses up on stilts, kind of, in order to accommodate for future storms. I mean, personally, we didn't choose to rebuild because Seabright is such a small landmass that it's really only a matter of time before it's swallowed up, to be realistic. It's not a town that's going to last long as the sea level rises, and we deal with the terrifying reality of climate change. And I think to speak to the question, the media really does only portray a few perspectives and definitely did not speak to the amazing power of the volunteers. I think the Jersey Strong movement was definitely a cultural phenomenon and was maybe helpful in getting our stories out there in terms of the struggles, but not so much in terms of the community in rebuilding. So yeah, I mean, the media is usually just kind of catastrophizes things or portrays the negative aspects of the storm and then doesn't really show, at least from what I saw, the amazing power of the community. Justina, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the media, when the storm first hit, they obviously showed a lot of the disaster, and they also talked a lot about people going in and ransacking houses, and our house was ransacked 2 times before we even one time and then ransacked again. And they definitely kind of push that. And in the beginning, I do think that they talk a little bit about rebuilding, but after a little while, they're kind of moving on to the next thing, the next disaster, or the next, issue. And I think that media in general has a problem with only showing negative things. So it kind of makes sense.
One group that we need to acknowledge helping us, because the media won't cover them or they don't want the media, is Christian Aid Ministries of Berlin, Ohio. They became our builders and helped us throughout the process of rebuilding and building 41 new homes from the ground up. So if you need help, the Amish and Mennonite folks in this community, in this town, this country, through Christian Aid Ministries are the ones that you all need to make contact with, because they will come in and help you to rebuild.
The media, to what Justina and Iliana have said, it's true. They sensationalize the negatives, and then they just move on. And there's no mention at all. And my experience has been that when there is a disaster, community does become so important. It's your neighbors, it's the people around you. They've been through the same thing. They hold you close and they keep you because they're experiencing that same sort of stuff. None of that ever makes it to the news network. And it's frustrating because that's really what this country's about.
Yeah.
It's about the power to help each other, the willingness to lift each other up, and on the worst day, be that laughter that we need. And it just, none of that ever makes it to the nightly news. Now, I do have to tell you that MSNBC came and did a story about us, and so did PBS. But they were.
It shows us as the persons of the week.
It was because we had some people that were here that had links to the media. That's the only reason that happened. If you didn't, you could forget it. No, that's just, it's a sad fact.
Because those media reports are available online. Just Google Irene MacIntosh, and you can find the videos of those things.
Is there another question?
Iliana,
Yeah.
can you talk about how climate change affects your PhD work?
Well, my PhD work, I'm a PhD student at UW-Madison studying primate behavioral ecology and primate conservation. And so, I mean, climate change especially impacts non-human primates because they can't move very well, and so especially due to habitat fragmentation, they're kind of stuck in these little pockets. And I study in the Brazilian Atlantic forest, where over 95% of the forest has been lost to deforestation, and it's predicted to get significantly hotter. And so these primates, as well as non-human primates and human primates around the world, are expected to suffer a lot. And it definitely impacts how I do my research and the lens in which I look at my questions. And it is kind of up in the air at this point how behaviorally flexible these primates will be in dealing with the severity of climate change that they're already experiencing. So I don't know if that, before I go on a huge tirade, I don't know if that gives you some insight. I can hear the dogs. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Justina,
Yes.
did this experience impact your studies at all, or your path as far as career?
Well, like Irene and Ed, my sister and I have both been environmentalists all our life. So I have always wanted to be in the environmental field. Right now, I work at an environmental consulting firm. So we do remediation work regarding water, soil, and air contamination on the East Coast. So obviously, my path has always been, environmental work. My main goal is to work in nonprofits, which I think was heavily impacted by my experience with Sandy, because I came, I was in direct contact with volunteers, and I volunteer. So yeah, I think that was that was a huge impact. Not necessarily what I'm working on now, but definitely my goals for the future.
Yay, thank you.
Thank you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks for Iliana, for Justina. We give you thanks for Mr. Ed and Miss Irene. But we give you thanks that in the trials and the storms of our lives, you have always guided us, strengthened us, and never took our hope away. So we give you thanks, Lord, that at this time as we ponder and we march forward, we pray that you give us the tools so that we can give hope, so that we can inspire a change, that we can usher a new season in which we can work together so that our world is a better place. We give you thanks for the testimonies that were shared here, and we pray for them in their respective journeys so that you may sustain them, that you continue to prepare them, Lord, for the new tasks and challenges that they will face, but continue to preserve their lives as they continue to inspire, organize, and lead. Teach us as well, Lord, that we can also do these same things, for you have told us to go and do the same. So, Lord, with these tools that we have, with these stories that we have, with these testimonies that we have, we pray that you continue to use us as we bring these stories to our fold, to our church, to our communities. Bless us all on this evening. Bless us wherever we may be doing the work of the Lord. And bless us all, Lord, as we try to strive for our plan. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. You are made in the image of God. 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 You are made in the image of God.
Go in peace.
Thanks again to our speakers for tonight and for everyone who joined us. Have a great night. Good night.
Thank you.